Thanks, everyone. I'm Bill Coleman here with the Benton Institute, and welcome to our USE Cohort meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think it'll be an interesting session, and hope we've got more people coming on now. I appreciate your attendance. I apologize for some of the late notice. One of those things you're sure in your mind that you accomplished, but didn't. So. And thanks to Robbie for a little prod this morning. I appreciated that as well. I think we've got a relatively small group today. Why don't we, rather than break into small groups, let's just talk generally in our larger group here, I think, as about what's going on here in your communities and maybe things that you see as changing through the pandemic. And our question is, how are you using technology differently in the past year? What are you planning to spur technology use in your community in the next 6 months? And so I'm just gonna get the conversation going. For myself, certainly the video conferencing as a daily activity is something that I think is kind of overwhelming all of us. I think Zoom fatigue possibly is setting in. But who would have thought that, even though this technology has existed for quite a number of years in the same fashion from Google or Skype and so on, rarely used and now used, I won't say obsessively or excessively. I'm not sure which is more correct. And so I think that's the most important thing that for me that's changed. And then as I've always worked from home. How about you, Rhonda? Oh, maybe Rhonda's not there. Anne, I see your smiling face. What's new with your technology use?
So I didn't use technology too much a year ago, but now that's how our coalition meets. We meet on Zoom. Pretty much all my connection is on Zoom with the people I work with, and also even with my family. We've celebrated holidays and birthdays and stuff on Zoom. Even events like we did a trivia night on Zoom, some of the fundraisers and stuff. So I really think in some ways it's really great technology.
Good, good. And Kim, welcome. I don't know that we've seen you before. Welcome.
Thank you. This is my first opportunity to get to be in your meeting. I'm in Aledo, Illinois, also U of I grad. And I heard a little conversation about some Illinois good stuff, so that's great. I have been in technology, although my degree is in animal science. I was in software and those type of things. So technology is a big part of what I do, and so I'm interested in finding out about providing better. I'm on a Wi-Fi cellular hotspot in rural America, so I'm anxious to hear and learn. So
thanks, great, welcome.
Thanks.
Don,
hi,
welcome from Brown
like
County.
Like you, Bill, I've worked from home prior to the pandemic, but we had moved about 5 years before. So if our home had not had fiber, that probably would not have been possible. So with the pandemic in our local schools, of course, those families that did not have internet as an option, that became visible quite quickly. So the grant was very timely so that we could address those concerns.
Great, thanks. Isaac, welcome from Winnebago County and Region 1 Planning Agency. You're running a regional economic and planning group. How are you seeing local governments use this technology differently over the past 6 to 9 months?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, or almost good afternoon. Yeah, Region 1 Planning Council is based here in Rockford. Um, and we do, you're all familiar with the term B2B. So we provide G2G, government to government services. We're sort of like that back office for local government, whether it's writing comprehensive plans or writing grants or doing custom technical assistance. So the sort of conversation that we're engaged in right now, steering groups on any given day, I'm a member of a dozen or more different steering groups for different planning topics on projects we're working on with our partner local governments in Winnebago, Boone. There's about 5 to 7 counties we partner with and work with, depending on the topic, whether it's transportation planning or economic development or what have you. So the last year, all of our in-person meetings, trips to City Hall or county administration, it's all been replaced with, of course, Zoom. So that's been something of a culture adjustment. But yeah, at this point, a year into the pandemic, a lot of our local government partners are wanting to get back to small in-person group meetings. The Zoom fatigue is definitely taxing a lot of the folks that I interface with. So we're starting to have some small group meetings and move away from Zoom. But the last year has been a good education and just becoming familiar with Zoom and all of the sort of do's and don'ts associated with that. At home, my wife is a teacher, and so my daughter was, she's in 7th grade, so learning remotely, my wife teaching remotely, so pretty well versed on all of that on the home front. But
Good. Well,
Yep.
thanks for that. Amanda, you help run another regional organization. Besides Zoom, are there other technology tools that have come into play that you're using to communicate and manage conversations or manage projects?
Sure. So we use GoToMeeting, which is really similar to Zoom. It's just another virtual platform that we're using. And so we use that. The other thing that we use is a lot more email communication, which would be, our constant contact newsletters and everything. So we see a lot more of that, but I would say also in addition to that, we do a lot more too with just even the phone calls. So they all kind of tie in together. But as far as anything additional, the other thing I would say is for us here at the council, one of the newest things of technology for us is previously due to all of the COVID, prior to it, we never had necessarily our equipment set up in our conference rooms for these electronic meetings to take place. So now we have a very nice large TV and cameras in there, and we can do conferences from that conference room virtually. So just a lot of technology updates that we have seen even, locally in our own company here.
Okay, thank you. Are anyone using more tools like one I saw demonstrated the other day is kind of a whiteboard using essentially 3M Post-it notes, but virtual ones. People using other tools like that to do planning, to organize?
Yeah, we are here in Aledo. For those that don't know me, I'm Kinsey Lafferty. I'm the programs manager at High Tech Small Town, and I am the use committee chair for our Mercer County Internet Initiative. So I was placed with High Tech Small Town through Lead for America, and we do have sessions where we meet with the organization that's spread all throughout the US. And since we were supposed to have conferences every few months in person, that hasn't worked out. So it has been really helpful, if there's someone in Hawaii on the line, we had a conference over the weekend and we've been using those tools, and it has been really effective, especially if you're trying to problem solve or generate ideas. It's a really nice tool for everyone to work together.
Good, thank you. How about at the Benton Institute?
you want me to go first, Adrian? So hi, everybody. My name's Robbie Macbeth. I'm with the Benton Institute. And yeah, we went right around a year from today, went remote. And it's kind of odd because on the one hand, it's sort of like the use ticked up, but to me, it's been indicative of just like the not the invisibility, but just the unseen aspect of how heavy our technology use has been, in a way that's like a little bit surprising that there wasn't too much of a dip in terms of output and communication. We often like to joke, even my coworker that I sat next to, we would often communicate via, Skype or instant messaging or these sorts of things when we could have just, talked to one another or just like said something out loud. So I think the difference is it just really made it much more obvious, like how heavily reliant we are on communication technologies working. If there's an internet outage, it's like I can't even get close to doing anything related to my work. So for me, I think especially through work, it's reestablished the importance of broadband and the ability to use things and how it's like second nature, I think, for a large part of the population. And so kind of communicating that at a more universal level, I think is really important to me.
Good, thank you.
Yeah,
Adrienne,
just,
anything you wanna add to
we
that?
sit on a lot of coalitions with people from all over the country in DC. A lot of people use different platforms, Zoom, Teams, GoToMeeting, WebEx, so you just have to get familiar with all these meeting platforms, download everything. And I just want to point out with Robbie, I love that comment of I sit next to a guy, but I'm still Skyping. Well, part of it is we're in an open office plan. And so in order to preserve, a degree of quiet, people are either, on noise canceling headphones or, for quick messaging, doing that. Yeah, I would say that because we're publishers and resource providers, we always used Google Docs and ways to share documents and edit, just to keep the Word document stuff, and the redlining down to a minimum. But I think we've gone much more toward that. And since we're going to give up our office space at the end of May, we are looking at things like Dropbox, all of the virtual bill paying, no more mail, no more location. And so I think all of that automated stuff that we do part of the time, we're going to accelerate because we're getting rid of our physical space, just because we've been without it for a year and it's proved not to be as painful as, as I thought. But whoever said Zoom fatigue, I do get that. Yeah. I do get it. Sometimes I'm 6 hours Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, and afterwards my head hurts. Anyway.
Good, thanks. Anyone else want to add what any transition in the last year that?
I don't think we heard from Susan Schultz. I was just looking at and Casey just got on the.
Yep. Go ahead, Kristen. Thank you.
You're not getting unmuted.
Oh, hold on.
There we go. The host had to unmute me. So Ann and I were on a call yesterday, and it was a PowerPoint presentation. What I really liked, and I have not seen up until now, but I could be way behind the times, was that the speaker's voice, what they were saying, was dictated below the PowerPoint. And I thought, wow, that was really beneficial, because if you're a visual learner, if you're a second language learner, I would like to be able to do that. So I want to know if that is something that is already a part of, I believe it was a Zoom call, if that's already a part of it, or if that's an add-on, or what that happens to be, because I found it really helpful. And it only kept 2 lines on at a time, but I'm looking forward to, they said they would send the information out to us. And so I'm looking forward to, once I get that and I look through the PowerPoint, I don't know if it will still be there, but I'm hoping that it will.
Good. Well, Don says that's available in Zoom and Google Meet.
Really? So it's something I have to find within the system and turn on.
Yeah, and that must
Okay.
be, Don, do you know where that is in Zoom? Or Susan?
Hello. Hey,
Hi.
you know, I have to say, with Webster University being a worldwide university and having many campuses throughout the world, we've been really on the up and up with technology, you know, really forced to. And then, you know, so that having classes, you know, with our students, our graduate study students and instructors, there was no issues with the pandemic. I will say on the undergrad side of the house, which is primarily, you know, right here in Southern Illinois, St. Louis area, there certainly was the traditional, this is how you conduct classes in the classroom. That was a struggle for them. So it was interesting watching the two different dynamics of graduate, which we've been doing this for many, many years, into the undergrad side of the house. And then I sit on a lot of committees in the community. And I will say that, again, it was very interesting seeing how we conduct business today. Normally everything's face-to-face, you know, business after hours, everything. People enjoy seeing each other and small talking and catching up. And so it was, you know, get caught up and conduct meetings via Zoom or some sort of software like that. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is, I don't know if you're familiar with sprints, but you know, sprints are a way in which people get projects done very quickly. And so whether it be done in a community or, you know, in just a business setting, you know, people sign in, not necessarily by camera, but they conduct business using, you know, burn down charts and Trello boards. And so that was another way that we've been using technology. It's a little bit different. It takes a minute to get used to. I'll say at first I was not a fan. It's all up here. I don't want to put it in writing, but now we've been forced to kind of, you know, conduct business to get things done quickly by using this method of, you know, internal tasks. So that's been a lot of fun, something different, something new and challenging.
Somebody needs to unmute Linda, who I think wants to talk, Nancy. Okay. There you go, Linda.
I didn't necessarily want to talk. I was responding to something that's going on in the chat, and someone asked, can you unmute yourself, when we wanted to see if we wanted to do transcription or the captions today in this meeting. So that's all I was responding to. I couldn't unmute at that time.
Okay, good. So we've probably hammered that home. It's a lot of video adoption, no doubt, and some of these other tools. It was interesting when I think I'm trying to remember what meeting we were on the other day with there was a Ready program, I think, Adrienne, where they had all of a sudden they opened up a box and there's about 20 different online tools. I don't know if that was in the Google platform or if that was what that was, but that was scary that all those things are out there yet to be figure out how to use. One of the things, you know, with this group in the USE cohort is the idea is how do we promote smarter adoption of technology tools with our business community, with our healthcare providers, schools, small business. And a lot of that work is done face to face, and especially with those who are kind of at the lower end of that use spectrum that don't necessarily have a lot of confidence when you start giving them directions, they might panic a little bit and have a harder time with those things. And so in our program this year, we've had probably less focus on use than we would have thought when we designed the program, because that involves people in libraries and instructors leaning over shoulders and so on. As we hopefully continue to transition into people being closer to each other, working together on site, that's going to enable more of this technology training and sophistication of use. What kind of plans are people forming? I know that Palatine has had this conversation. Kristen, you want to chime in on how you guys hope to spur more use of technology in Palatine?
Sure. We've got our strategic plan right in front of me. We definitely know that technology is something that we need to provide to many in our community, whether it's children based on schools needing it, not being in session at all times now, whether it's the elderly, whether it's parents, because there are many places in Palatine that do not have technology. But what we have decided is that we are going to create a technology resource guide so that we can have everything in front of us and really see where our deficits are. And then that will give all of our partners the ability to share the information with the community for what they might need, but also show us where we are lagging and lacking and where we need to do more research and where we need to come to you guys and say, hey, this is a problem, how, who can help support us.
Okay, good.
So that's our plan.
And Susan, I know you're chair of the youth group for Leadership Council Southwest Illinois. What's kind of on your agenda?
There we go. We have a lot of
You're
exciting
muted. There we
things
go.
going on right now for our group. One of probably the biggest things is we've decided to send out a survey to all of the administrators at the local schools in the 9 counties. We're expecting those results to come back to us, sometime by the end of the next week or so. So we anticipate probably what everybody else is seeing, just the number one, the broadband issue, right? Having the strength, the fiber, that's going to be the first thing. And then the other issue, of course, is once you have broadband, do we have the tools? So do we have, the computers and the laptops and keyboards and all the things that are needed to conduct business and school in that way? And then, of course, how do they use it once they have it? And a lot of people would agree that the younger generation, they're born with this. They cut their teeth on technology. So we don't think that the younger kids necessarily are going to have issues with how to use a computer, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. The other thing that we've looked at is the telehealth portion of use, and we definitely know there is some great, not only doctors and nurses, but also the patients. And you probably have all heard me use the example of, my folks getting the COVID test and coming back and they had to sign into an app. They didn't know, how do I get an app? What's an app? So, and then I tried to help them download the app and it was very difficult. And it shouldn't be so difficult. And I think part of the reason there was a challenge for my parents, of course, I think it's generational. But for me, the challenge was it wasn't user friendly. And I'm pretty good at that stuff. So the fact that I couldn't do it made me think, when Walgreens was creating this quick need to provide, this source of a way that people can get their results, they did it in a rush, and the rush wasn't necessarily user friendly. So now people are going to go back and look at things, how it's been done, how they can make it better. And then the other thing we're looking at as far as use is our businesses and our government. So again, surveys and just talking, lots of research in our community, lots of chit chats and phone calls and emails and just really good conversation.
Good, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Is anyone else focusing on the business community, on technology adoption training? Yeah, Kim, hi. Oh, you're muted. Oh, there she goes.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Earlier, I wasn't able to unmute. Yes, from the business community side, we normally host an event in January in Monterey. Our headquarters are in Moline, Illinois, but we host an event in Monterey. And so we had to
Monterey,
pivot.
California?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I'd like to attend that, I think.
Yes, you would. It's fabulous. But of course, nothing on Zoom can compare with that. But we pivoted to a virtual event. We had a lot of learning there, and I was thinking about a few of the things that some of the other folks have mentioned. We did find it interesting. We were trying to figure out how to deliver the content in a meaningful way that would be engaging. But also we paid attention to how people logged in. So did they use a desktop? Did they use their phone? What tool were they using? And so it was interesting to see that really we only had 1 or 2 iPads. Now, this is an agricultural event. So it's mostly growers, farmers, ranchers that normally attend. So it was interesting, and we were sensitive to the fact that people would be like myself, where limited, high speed necessarily internet. So we had a lot of learning along that line, and also engagement. So we still presented the event as if it were live. It was recorded. It wasn't just a Zoom meeting with a speaker talking. We tried to still have that that feel that we get in Monterey. But the thing that we did is then we did do a live Q&A to engage people. So we're still learning about how people want to engage and have conversations. Networking is a big piece that is normally part of our event. That's really a bit of our mojo. And so we're learning how to do that through technology. But I just think there are some things that won't necessarily be replaced. But specifically, I thought it was interesting that mobile use was there. And I just like to concur. I'm sorry, I can't remember who mentioned about helping their parents with that. My folks are almost 80, and they both say, what do people who don't have a Kim do as far as understanding the technology, how to use it, how to get an app, all of those kind of things. And I've been on some of those apps, the Walgreens one, the CVS one, trying to coordinate some of this stuff. And if you're not very tech savvy, they were complicated to navigate. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
Good, no, thanks. That's very interesting. Great. Anyone else want to talk about their community's plan for furthering use in the next time frame? If not, I think we're going to move to our guest, our first guest today. Tim McIlvaine is here with us from the Learning Technology Center in Champaign. And Tim is on, I believe, Tim, you're on the broadband advisory group. Is that correct?
I'm on a broadband advisory group. I think there are a few.
Okay. And works really with schools across the state on technology transformation. So Tim, thanks so much for joining us. We know that schools, I know in Minnesota, I think they closed for 4 days, and the governor said, okay, 4 days to plan how you're going to do this. And then, launch up on virtual learning. And the learning that the school, the education establishment it's got to be tremendous. I mean, talk about a rocket shaped curve there, straight up to figure out how these technologies work and how they could be used into the future. So thanks for joining us today. We're really interested in what you have to say about technology transformation and education.
Thanks for having me. And let me share my screen here. So while you all were talking, I was updating my slides to address a few things that came up. But let me first introduce myself a little bit more. I'm the Executive Director of the Learning Technology Center, and we are a statewide organization that is primarily funded by the Illinois State Board of Education. And we provide technology services and professional learning to all public K-12 school districts in the state. We also work a lot with private schools as well. We work in these main bullet point areas. We do a lot of professional learning and events with educators, administrators, IT staff. We help school districts develop digital learning plans, and that's really how to use technology. We provide technical support, high-level technical support when districts build new buildings and they need somebody outside of the district and the contractor they're working with to look over quotes and plans. We help districts with data privacy and cybersecurity, which is a huge topic right now. Access and equity issues, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today falls into that. We help them purchase. We have a cooperative that districts can belong to, and then we facilitate communities of practice. So kind of like what this group is, we meet with technology leaders across the state during in-person meetings and virtual meetings. And I do a lot of work with administrators, superintendents too. So the map is just to give you an idea of where some of our regional people are, but we have 20 people throughout the state, and we'll be bringing on about 10 more within the next 4 months. I just added this slide in here based on what you guys were talking about with connectivity. Part of my presentation is on connectivity, but I didn't identify some of the barriers that that came up. School and district connectivity, at least with public schools, has been something that has been the focus of Governor Rauner, Governor Pritzker, and the Illinois State Board of Education for a number of years. We've worked with national groups in other states to address this, and I don't have the accurate percentage of connectivity off the top of my head. It's something like 98.5% of school buildings have adequate internet connectivity. And that is up from something like 85% 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So every year, the Learning Technology Center, in partnership with the State Board of Education, we do a survey of schools. And this one was completed in in January, but this data is from November when we put an end to part of the survey. And you can see some of the barriers. 54% of districts say they have no barriers. So this is the 98% is based on, which is not on this chart, of connectivity is based on national standards, what national groups, experts say is enough connectivity to provide digital learning, a robust infrastructure for students. This data here is self-reported data, and it really depends, when you do surveys like this, it depends on who's answering it. So a tech person is going to answer them differently than a superintendent versus a teacher. So most of the people who answered this were superintendents who might not have an accurate understanding of what's going, like the boxes and wires, because they have other things to think about. But district hardware within the building was a top concern, so is monthly ongoing expenses. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. And if you are interested in doing research on the communities or the schools, districts in your community, I encourage you to go to connectk12.org. This is a database run by a national organization that we've worked with in the past that takes publicly available data, they clean it up a little bit, and they put it in a database so that people can see what their so school districts can see what their neighbors are paying for internet, what they're getting. It helps reduce the cost when you're able to negotiate with vendors or with internet providers. So it's a great resource. And just in general, the Learning Technology Center works very closely on district broadband connectivity issues. So I thought I'd throw that in there. We're going to talk about kind of education technology transformation as a whole, though. And that's a really big, big concept. School systems were understandably overwhelmed and unequipped to respond when COVID began about a year ago, because the US education system is built on in-class experiences, and all the technology investments, or most of the technology investments, are focused on the school level broadband internet and devices and curriculum. In many communities, the schools are also, as you guys know, the schools are also the hub for support such as school meals, mental health counseling, childcare, and in small rural communities, schools are often the economic driver of that community. And then when you look at homes, in many homes, especially for low-income families, students lacked access to the internet, devices, dedicated quiet places to work. So when faced with a question, when districts are faced with a question, can we remotely support students and staff last year? Many districts would have said that's impossible, but in general, they had to do it anyways. So what we're going to talk about just for the next probably 5 minutes or more is what did that look like? Because that's kind of informs where we're going to be going next with education. Within a week, many of those districts who said that it would be impossible to roll out devices to every single student or to provide access for remote learning, they were able to do it. Many districts were not able to do it. There was a variety of different methods for supporting schools. Sometimes school districts would print out packets and have parents and caregivers drive to the school to pick up the packets on a weekly basis. And that went on for months. I'm sure that some of your organizations experienced the backlog in purchasing technology devices. At one point, there was a 6-month turnaround when you would purchase laptops or Chromebooks, which is what many, about 90% of school districts in Illinois use. Now, luckily, that's gone down quite a bit. It's around the 6-week turnaround. Still a long time, but it's working. So we're going to focus on the student impact in the last year, the teacher impact, and the district impact. And some of this you're going to know. You know from your own experiences and from what you read. And hopefully some of this is going to be new to you too. With student impact, there's such an impact on students that I can't put it all in bullet points here. Educators, parents, students know firsthand the high cost of remote learning. And I think we just be clear, not every place in Illinois has done remote learning for as long as other places. So I'm in Champaign. Many of the districts around here were full in person starting September. Some are still doing hybrid models. In fact, across the nation, having a hybrid model of education was the most popular model in the past year. And hybrid means you have some remote and some in person. So you might go 2 days a week in person, or for a half day here and a half day there. The goal being trying to make sure that there was social distancing and limited exposure. Whereas other places, it was full remote until just recently. So we know that social emotional health has suffered quite a bit. And when schools had to address this last year, that really became the focus of a lot of what they did. From the State Board of Education on down to schools and classrooms, there was an importance on supporting students over grades, over learning, and I would say justifiably so in many of those cases. And still there's a huge focus on this social emotional learning. There's access to opportunities, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And then learning loss. There's a learning loss is a phrase, at least in my world, that gets thrown around a lot. And the perception is that there's a loss, that students who have spent the last year in a hybrid model of learning or a remote model have lost time, they've lost knowledge, they've lost opportunities. And it's a narrative that our children, the basic narrative is that our children are losing out and falling behind and they need to catch up. So the idea of learning loss really is a calculation. It's the language of testing, of measuring students' knowledge. So an increase in standardized tests, for example, equates to learning gain. A decrease in a standardized test equates to learning loss. And when test scores are compared from one year to another, you have gains or losses. And these calculations, this idea of a learning loss, are showing that students have not learned as much during the same time period this year as last year or the year before. And here's a chart, a study from, I think this one's from January, where 67% of math and 87% of reading learning occurred over the pandemic that would have traditionally occurred. On average, that means students are losing an equivalent of 3 months of learning in mathematics and 1 month of learning and reading. And I've seen lots of these studies, so I would not take this as a the penultimate study. But the idea that there is some losses is true. But the real truth is that learning is complicated, that nothing is, what learning loss is describing is not tangibly lost. It's just a scorekeeping mechanism. And there's a lot of research behind this because learning loss is a concept that is applied to what happens during the summer. During the summer, most students are not in school and they have to catch up in September or August. And there's a period of catching up and eventually they do. They're able to make those gains. So many people are concerned with the learning loss. I'm not concerned because educators across Illinois, on the whole, know how to teach students very well. So they will be able to make up that. Here's my opinions. I'm just laying out there. They're going to be able to make up that missed time. They have to, really. But I am very concerned about the opportunity gaps, the inequities, and the digital divide. And that's really what this chart shows too. You see that learning loss was very acute in schools that predominantly served students of color, where scores were 59% of the historic average in math and 77% in reading. And all students really, they're impacted in some way, but the learning disruptions focused on schools, a lot of research supports this too. It focuses on schools that support Black, Hispanic, Native American students who attend schools that serve high poverty populations, students who attend public rather than private schools, and schools and students in rural and small towns, as opposed to suburban and urban schools. So there's that context to what's going to be happening in education. With teachers, there is a lot of burnout from teachers, and there is a severe teacher shortage, not just in the state, but across the country. And this was going on before the pandemic too, and the pandemic is worsening it. There's also an increased awareness of students' home lives, just like you could see into what's going on and the people on the Zoom call. Teachers are able to see in what's going on in their students' lives, and vice versa. Parents are increasingly aware of what is going on in the classroom. So I would say that that's absolutely a benefit. And there's an increased reliance on technology, just like you guys were sharing. I would say, at least compared to what you were sharing, it is 1,000 times more pivotal in an educational setting. There's technology for communication, instruction, curriculum, assessment, technology for professional learning, for making sure that educators are aware of how to use those tools. What we deal with, what my organization deals with, is a lot of that helping teachers and schools understand that technology. And usually when I have a conversation, especially this past week and the week before, when I have a conversation with superintendents about the apps or the websites, the digital tools that they use, I say that in a small school district, you're probably using 200. In a medium to large size school district, you're probably using 2,000 across all of your teachers. That is a lot to keep track of. But it also offers a lot of opportunities. And then I also say here, an increased reliance on self. I mean, to be successful in the past year, teachers had to be driven. They had to find information on their own and understand, for a large part, how to integrate it themselves. Now, organizations like myself helped, districts helped, schools helped, but it was a lot to take on. So the ones that thrived would be the ones that really were relying on themselves to push themselves forward.
Tim, can I just ask a clarifying question? Did you say that sometimes in a single district, there may be up to 2,000 apps being used by various teachers in that district?
And more than that, yeah. Yep.
And is there a drive? I know that this was an emergency, we got everybody up. Is there a drive to standardize? Because going back to your statement, you have to be motivated, you have to rely on self. I mean, there's going to be a wide range of technology proficiency, plus teachers have connectivity problems. I mean, I just wonder whether, you know, at the ISBE or at your regional level, there may be a drive to say, these are the best apps, use this stuff, so that you don't get this disparity across classroom.
Yes and no. So on a statewide level, there's no mandate. However, there is a law that goes into effect July 1 that requires districts to sign a data privacy agreement with every single vendor that they use. And that's why I know the 2,000 number is because districts are facing this. So I think naturally, because of this law, that there's going to be some reduction in the number of tools, because it's a lot of work for a district to do this. And when I have conversations with superintendents and curriculum directors, and my staff do as well, we say you need to pick some basic core tools that everybody uses. And then if a teacher wants to use something else for a valid purpose, that's fine. But everybody in the school, students, teachers, staff, they know this core set of tools. And in Illinois, the core set almost always includes Google, the Google Suite, sometimes the Microsoft Suite, and then you build off from there. Because of the rapid changes, the teachers obviously had to grapple with the idea of how do you effectively deliver content, engage students, and keep them safe when they're not physically there. And there's so many different answers to it, so many different strategies. Effective classroom management is one of those. But I mean, we spend days and days working with groups of teachers to kind of master that. Regarding the educational tools, which you all were talking about, there's been an explosion in the number of tools that are available, and there were a lot available before a year ago. These two charts compare 2020 to 2018 In 2020, Zoom took the top place at 60%. Kahoot, which is an assessment platform, Flipgrid, which is having a major issue today because of a security issue. They are at 39%, or they were, now they're probably at 5%. So you see a lot of tools being adopted. I think one thing that is interesting that was mentioned earlier is the transcription ability in Zoom. There has been a lot of progress with accessibility features for students with special needs and just people with special needs too, which is a wonderful thing to see. So you have that and the text-to-speech ability in Google Slides as well. And there's a lot of neat features, a lot of neat things that have been developed because of this. And a big driver is that there's a lot of money to be had from vendors. There's a lot of money in education right now. And we'll talk a little bit about that later too, but it's really driving a lot of innovation adoption. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't have a stat on this, but I would say probably 80% of educational apps, educational vendors that provide like a digital service provided it for free for at least 3 months. Some are still doing it today. So that meant that there was no barrier in terms of money for schools to adopt these tools. And now schools are trying to sort out what do they really need to keep. And I mean, to be honest, I'm not in a school, but I've heard that there's a little bit of chaos in terms of all that was brought on. So from a district impact, this is kind of what we're gonna stay on the district level at this point. Like I said, there's increased focus on SEL, parent communication, technology access, like those things that you would think of. And there's been some gains that with the opportunity gaps that are there. And the information here is about just having devices. In March 2020, Illinois State Board of Education survey went out to school districts asking how many instructional devices do you have that could be sent home to families? The amount was 51%. So 51% of students basically could get a device from their school. That doesn't mean that they're going to have internet access at home, but they could get a device. In January, the survey that the LTC and ISB conducted together showed that 87% now have devices. And in a large part, that's due to the influx of money that's flowed into schools. So when you think about what is the biggest problem with access in schools, devices is not it. It's really that home connectivity. This slide is about instruction. So instruction has had to change quite a bit over the last year. I'm just kind of bouncing around to some of these numbers. Basically, the research is proving that teachers' instructional materials and how they led a class didn't necessarily change completely. Most teachers, at least 42% of teachers, say that their hours working in a remote environment with students was synchronous. So that's like what we're doing right now. We're in real time. It is synchronous. Asynchronous would be taking a online class, for example, where you do it on your own time and submit it on your own time. And some schools did that too. And then some did a combo. Nationally, 66% of schools have adopted or will adopt soon a learning management system. And that's kind of a system to manage all this online learning. Some districts had that in place before the pandemic. Some adopted it during the pandemic, especially because it was free for a period. But there are lots of tools out there to help manage workflows and relationships students and assignments. And there's been a few other things that have helped address gaps. The federal funding, the ESSER 1 and 2 and soon 3 funding has put millions of dollars into the education space in Illinois. The state board has offered a lot of different guidance on different things, but essentially they've allowed districts to spend these federal funds on technology, and some have decided to spend it on equipment or personal safety materials. There's federal E-rate, which has been around for a long time, but a lot of that goes, all of that goes to external and internal internet connectivity. So there's a lot of money already being spent on making sure districts have that connectivity in the building, which has helped some, but not a whole lot during the past year. And each year, Illinois districts get around $80 million or so. Right now, they're discussing changing. I think they're actually beyond discussing. I think it's something like $9 billion, or will be going. And don't quote me on this because I'm not our E-rate expert. I have somebody on my staff who's an E-rate expert, but I believe it's going to be, some of that is going towards home connectivity for students and other groups.
It's actually 7.2 billion, Tim.
Okay.
And, right. And,
excellent.
Sorry. And there's a big debate about that home connectivity issue because it gets a lot of our ISPs up in arms if a school could provide it, but it certainly does allow a school's network to be spread into neighborhoods, et cetera, off hours or even during hours if there is excess capacity. But there's, this is all information at this particular point.
I mean, that is,
so not a lot of clarity.
That is a key thing though, that I've been working with districts on funding issues for the past 6 years, and there are so many districts that spend a lot of money to get connectivity that's funded through E-rate, and they cannot share it with anybody because of the regulations.
That's right.
And that would be a huge boon, especially to small communities where it's the anchor institution. So it would be, that'd be fantastic all around. Now there's ISB has also used some of their federal funding to do different grants, and these are just, the first one is just one of a few that purchase additional devices. There's a revolving loan fund that has been around for a long time that districts can take advantage of. Last year, districts borrowed $860,000. You have to pay it back though, so that's not always attractive. There's been an E-rate state matching grant program for a few years now, and I was listening to the State Board of Education board meeting yesterday. It looks like it's on track to be renewed again for another year, and that would be about $12.6 million. So that helps with the special construction costs when a district wants to build out and gain access to fiber. And I've started losing track of all the funding opportunities. There's emergency assistance for non-public schools program, which is going to probably be approved for $84 million in the state. The Department of Innovation and Technology is probably going to be getting $5 million from ISB. These things need to be signed off on, but it looks like it's going to be. And speaking from somebody who works a lot with superintendents, I'm hearing across the state that they're receiving anywhere from 7% to 10% of their annual budget and federal dollars just through the ESSER funding. So there are important reasons why that's happening, and I don't want to discount that, but there is also a lot of funding available for technology or other educational purposes, especially for certain types of schools that qualify for certain types of funds. So I'm circling back to the LTC a little bit, because I think that in the past year, we have had a unique ability to work with districts and kind of gain a perspective on everything that's going on. And it's a lot. It's a lot for my staff, it's a lot for school leaders, and certainly a lot for students. During this time, we've supported districts with school planning, with evaluations and assessments of technology. They brought on a lot of technology. We helped them think through that. We've helped identify resources, develop resources, worked with community groups. We held a remote learning conference for 2,000 educators in January. Overall, in the past year, we've worked with over 25,000 educators across the state, hosted over 700 events. So these are some of our takeaways for what the future of education looks like. I want to frame it in opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities here. For states, they recognize, and Illinois know, I'm not throwing Illinois State Board of Education under the bus, they know this. There's a need for real-time data on a lot of things they've never captured before. You have to balance that with making sure you don't put a burden on school districts in answering those questions. But in conversations between legislators and the governor's office and state board and school districts, everybody wants to know how many devices everybody has and from week to week and what the internet connectivity is. And there's been some collection of data, but there's not a comprehensive system in that regard. There's a lot of other data collecting systems. There have been a lot of programs that have been established to support districts during this time. And those are going to keep on going. My program has grown. There is a virtual school in Illinois that supports many districts, and that has grown quite a bit. And there's an increased awareness of the gaps. Digital equity issues have been around since the idea of digital has existed. People have talked about it for such a long time, and there has been no clear answer for it or no clear focus on it. And that's, again, my perspective. I think many people would agree. And now there is a laser focus on making sure people have connectivity in their homes, at schools, making sure they have devices, and making sure they have the knowledge to use all those. From a teacher's perspective, I think the opportunities really are, there's been a focus on foundational skills like classroom management, digital citizenship, how do students engage online in a safe way, and technology enhanced learning. And that is such a huge category, but there's superintendents, administrators, and teachers want their schools to be able to use technology. There is such a desire for this and a move toward it. And there's always going to be room to grow, but they've made great progress. I've already talked about the access to connectivity and devices. The home connectivity is still something that has to be addressed, right? And some of your projects maybe be working on that. And maybe the E-rate changes will help with that. But that is kind of that's out there right now, and we need to address it. I would also say the agility with using digital platforms, curriculum, instructional strategies. You mentioned collaborating online at the beginning and what tools you use. I'd recommend Jamboard is another one, Padlet, Menti. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of great tools, and I know that you're not all in education, but if you ever want a list, I'm happy to put together one for you. And then from districts, I think there are great opportunities for districts too. They have access to funds, and I know that they have things to spend them on besides technology. And really, I mean, I'm in education because I want to do what's best for students, and so are districts. And technology is not always the answer, but there's a lot of emphasis and focus on technology right now, and it can do a whole lot. So when I talk to superintendents, like I said, I encourage them to embrace simplicity with their investments, make sure that they adopt a core suite of tools, for example, make sure that their infrastructure, internal and external, is robust enough to handle, have experience with virtual learning now. And I don't know what we're on time, but I'm wrapping up soon. They have experience with virtual learning, and like we know from the data that is not been as effective as people wanted it to be, and in some cases that's putting it very mildly. But for some students, it has been fantastic. For some student groups with special needs, for example, I know I have a friend who has an autistic child. It has been amazing for that student, and districts recognize this. So you will see districts continuing with some form of virtual learning or encouraging it in some way. And certainly the blended learning, the digital learning as well. And districts have knowledgeable educators. And they will continue expanding professional learning opportunities and helping teachers and students know how to master the technologies in the classroom and their capabilities. Because otherwise the investment that districts are making is pointless if it can't be used in an effective and impactful way. And really the last opportunity here is embracing innovation. Innovation is a buzzword everywhere, but especially in education. But there have been small scale innovation, creating safe places or virtual career days. Districts put hotspots on vans or buses and park in the neighborhoods. I know districts building cellular towers on their buildings to get internet access out to homes. There have been a lot of out of the box thinking, and it's great to see, and that's going to continue. I just have 2 links there. One is for districts. I wasn't sure who was going to be here. So the continuous learning rubric is just a spreadsheet for districts to think through and talk through how are they going, what have they been doing, and how are they going to keep it up. And the Future Ready framework is a framework for just general innovation and education and technology. And I'll share this slide deck with all of you guys so that you have access to it. And then what does the future of education look like? That's such a hard question to answer, but COSN, a national organization for technology leaders, did put out a survey. They do this every year, asking 3 big questions. What does, the first one is, what are the biggest hurdles facing education? This came out in March, so this is pretty recent. Digital equity should be no surprise. Scaling and sustaining innovation is a hurdle. How do you take something that worked in a school, especially if you're Chicago Public Schools, and scale it up to the district? Keeping up with the evolution of teaching and learning is also a hurdle, because things are moving quickly. How can K-12 education accelerate innovation? Personalized learning, which is also another buzzword in education, but it's essentially making sure that a student, usually through technology, but not always, has personalized feedback, personalized content to their learning needs and where they're at this moment. And then as they move forward, things are personalized more. So technology enables that quite a bit. Social emotional learning is absolutely a huge factor, and learner autonomy will accelerate too. Innovation. Learner autonomy is just giving students and teachers the ability to control more of what they're learning and how they're learning it. Then what type of technology can help K-12 educators overcome challenges? Collaborations and collaborative environments. A lot of the softwares that are being adopted can do that. Untethered broadband and connectivity. So broadband connectivity that is not at the district, but can be throughout the community. And blended learning tools are another one. So this is the last slide. And this, again, I wasn't sure who would be there here. And this would be my recommendation for a district, but it involves a lot of you guys too. If a district is interested in moving forward with technology, they need a committee of many different stakeholders, including community members and parents, don't just talk to the tech director or don't just talk to the curriculum director. You need a lot of input from other people. You need partnerships with community organizations to address digital equity. You could extend access into community centers, libraries, businesses, museums, other public spaces. You can bring relevance to curriculum through learning opportunities or apprenticeships, community service, things like that. And so their communities have a great amount of interest in schools and a great ability to help further students' education. Districts need to adopt models that use space and time in new ways. Many districts are doing this before, but not all. Creating flexible schedules, flexible seating, so students are not in rows facing forward at a chalkboard. You need to be able to control your environment in a school. And I know that some of the money that's going to schools right now is going towards this and recreating classrooms. You mentioned open office space, for example. What's going on in the business world is trickling down to what's going on in classrooms. You need to ensure a robust infrastructure in and out of the classroom. These are quality devices, availability of the network, should be responsive support, like technical support, refresh cycle. This is something that many people don't think about, but right now, millions of devices are going into Illinois schools. Who is paying for that in 4 years when you can't use those devices anymore? So schools need to think about that. Create learner-centered environments. This has always been in education, but even more so now. And then rethink your budget. A budget is a reflection of your priorities. And as districts think about what are their priorities in a post-pandemic world and how do they want to transform education, they have to make sure that their budget reflects those priorities. So that is, I was asked to talk about how to transform education, and that's to be honest, that's not it. I mean, it's a little tiny part, and it's so complex. And I think the key really is in that collaborations with people in your community, with educators, collaborate with anybody that will collaborate with you. And I think that they'll take districts a long way.
Tim, thanks so much. I think that, I gave you that big wide open slot to fill as you'd like to, and I think you did a great job to talk about the challenges and what the schools are doing. Our Illinois Connected Communities, our schools are a part of all of these teams, and we see them as, especially through community ed, reaching out to not just the K-12 students, but throughout the whole community workforce, older adults, and so there's certainly a pillar of the community on which to build broadband initiatives. So thank you so much. That was a great illustration, and we look forward to, we'll distribute that slideshow.
Yeah, that would be great. I also want to endorse that connectk-12.org site that Tim talked about. It was originally run by Education Superhighway, who's really a well-respected organization in the field. And as they were phasing out of this work, it went to Connected Nation and Funds for Learning. Both Funds for Learning is an amazing organization out of Oklahoma, and Connected Nation is doing the new mapping for the state of Illinois. Bill and I saw a demo, and there's a really nice school district. You can actually focus by school district. So I'm sure it's the same, it's coming out of, or you can go to this site that Tim put on and do the same kind of thing, just get some more recent data than you'd get from the Federal Communications Commission at the point. Yeah. So thanks for letting people know about that site, Tim.
Well, you're welcome. I put the presentation in the chat, and if anybody needs to reach out to me, feel free to do that. I'm happy to talk more or have some of my staff work with your school districts.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think we're going to go right to our next speaker. who's Bill Bodine with the Illinois Farm Bureau. And he's talking about the changes, the transformations, current transformations and future ones in agriculture. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. If you'll bear with me for just a minute, I seem to be having some trouble with the camera. So
I can show you slides, which I know you just emailed to me.
Let's see if I can share my screen. We'll go that route.
Okay.
All right, is that visible to everyone?
Yes.
All right, how does that look? And my apologies, for some reason I'm having some trouble with my camera this afternoon. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. And, let me introduce myself. My name is, again, Bill Bodine. I'm the Director of Business and Regulatory Affairs for the Illinois Farm Bureau. I am responsible for a lot of our utility and energy policy, which includes broadband. And if you're not familiar with our organization, we're the state's largest general farm organization. We represents over 70,000 of the state's farmers. We have county farm bureau offices that are located in or represent each county in the state of Illinois. And we have local farmers that join their county farm bureaus and then become members of the Illinois Farm Bureau organization. So we're very local, we're very grassroots, we're very plugged into the rural communities. And as you can assume, broadband is a very big issue for our organization. It is a priority of ours to continue to advocate for affordable and reliable broadband services for our members and for rural communities. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about the need for broadband in agriculture today. I want to kind of lay a foundation that are specific to agriculture and the use of broadband for agriculture. But when we think about how our farmers use broadband, if they have access to it, it's no different than anyone else, especially right now. They may use it for their kids' education, to be able to access remote school, or they may use it to access meetings. Just as an example, I'm participating in our board meeting today, and we've got some of our directors from around the state of Illinois that are participating via Zoom. That we wouldn't normally do that. So they may be using it to stream, entertainment like everyone else, Netflix, if they have the opportunity, right? So just understanding that from a personal perspective, our farmers are using it just like everyone else is, and it's a quality of life issue for them. Now, beyond that, we get into some of the issues specific for agriculture. And the first of those specific uses is the weather. And today is not a pleasant weather day. I just came in outside, it's 50-mile-an-hour winds and cold and rainy and miserable. Our farmers need to know that information. And it doesn't matter what kind of farm you're operating. It doesn't matter what you're growing. Weather drives agriculture. We are subjected to Mother Nature every day. And our farmers need to understand what weather is coming at them so they can plan. Whether it's on the left here is the National Weather Service information, they may need to pull wind speed and temperature data. As an example, some herbicides that farmers use may require them to track that information, and they need to get access to that. The easiest way to do so is via the internet and via broadband. Radar information can be very helpful to help them plan. If you're going to be in the field, maybe you're trying to get a field planted, you want to get in before the rain, you see the radar, and our farmers may be checking that on a regular basis. So it starts with the access to information like weather that can be very beneficial to our members. And then it moves on to information about markets. And I'm not sure what everyone's experience and understanding of agriculture is that's joining us today, but our commodity farmers in the state, those commodities are traded publicly on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or the Chicago Board of Trade. And those platforms set the prices. Farmers do not set the prices for their own commodities. It's the trading world that actually sets those prices. And so farmers need to monitor market information on a regular basis. The prices of their commodities will change on a minute-by-minute basis. And so they will need the internet, they will need a broadband connection to access market information. And as you can see here, this is a shot of a Farm Week Now is actually a website that we operate that provides market information. This happens to be corn market information to our members, so they can keep an eye on what markets are doing. They may want to make a decision about whether they want to sell that corn today, or they might want to sell it, into the future. Now, they also can do so and communicate with their marketing locations, with their grains elevators via the internet. This on the left side of the screen here is an example of a series of local elevators and the cash bids that they put in place. So I won't get into a lot of the marketing dynamics around agriculture, but you've got there's always a difference between what the price of corn is in Chicago and what it is out in the country. And so the farmer will monitor that and try to capture the best possible spread. And so they'll see what's happening in Chicago. They'll get their cash bids from their local elevators and maybe make a decision. And then once they've made a sale, it gets into logistics management. So on the right side of the screen here is that's information coming from an app that's provided by ADM. And if I am a farmer and I want to sell my corn to ADM and I load a truck, I can actually access information via the internet as to what the wait times are for me to unload that truck. There are times if you're taking corn to ADM in Decatur, you can wait in line for hours. And so this information is really useful to our farmers. If they're going to be hauling that corn in, they can get an idea of what that time is going to be, how many loads they maybe can get in a day, and better plan for their logistics. And then we move up just from basic information into the precision ag world. And this is where broadband becomes critical because of the sheer volume of data that our farmers may need to move. If we think about how agriculture and how farming was done in the past, there were applications made, fertility applications, planting decisions made for entire fields, right? That is all changed over time. And made the precision agriculture much more localized basis, much more precise, hence the name precision agriculture. As an example, our farmers used to take maybe one soil sample for an entire field to understand the fertility needs for their crops. Now they will take multiple samples across much smaller areas of the field and create maps of that information to determine what the fertility needs are on much smaller areas within the field. A lot of our new equipment today has monitoring equipment, or has monitoring sensors in it to be able to track things like yield. A modern combine today can create a map of yield as it's going through the field. It's measuring that yield every few seconds, and that data can be used for analysis. So a farmer can take this information. On the left is a monitoring system out of a tractor cab. It's monitoring what that tractor is doing. In this case, it's planting. That data is then transferred over to the computer, and right now a lot that's happening via, there are systems that can do it wirelessly and transfer that over the internet into a software program where that's analyzed. Now, a farmer may do this, or he may need to send that data off to his agronomist who's helping him make decisions on what he wants to do and where he needs to apply fertility or where he doesn't need to apply fertility. Again, a lot of data. You can think about a sample of corn yield every so many seconds in a large field. That's a lot of data to move, and we need broadband to move the data over to the agronomist so he can help make decisions. That agronomist then may create what's called a prescription map that lays out how much fertility is needed in a certain area. That prescription needs to be sent back to the farmer so it can be loaded into his tractor, it can be loaded into his equipment, and then that map is what helps the machine determine where to apply the fertility in the field, and maybe where to increase or decrease herbicide applications. It's a much more efficient, much more precise way to farm. It helps our farmers control costs, and it has a lot of additional benefits in the form of, by placing fertility where needed. We don't have areas of the field where excess fertility is placed or excess herbicides are placed. Keeps that material from getting into water. It improves our environment. There are a lot of additional benefits outside of just for our farmers that come from precision agriculture. But it's much more difficult to do this if you don't have a broadband connection, just because of the sheer volume of data that needs to move. Now we'll move from our grain farmers over to our livestock farms. And Technology is pervasive in our livestock farms as well. And what I'm showing you here are two different examples of camera systems that livestock farmers may use to monitor their animals. On the left-hand side, this is a camera shot from a barn where these two cows are being monitored because they're in labor. And the way this used to be done by our farmers is they would have to go check on those cows on a regular basis to make sure they're doing okay. If they need any help, they may have to assist with the birthing process, or they may have to call the veterinarian. And that could mean getting up in the middle of the night to go check every couple of hours. If you have a lot of cows, you can understand how that can get tiring very, very fast. Now, what happens on some farms is cameras can be placed into those barns, and the farmers can monitor them remotely. As long as they have, again, a broadband connection to be able to access that information, they can monitor their cows right from their phone. And that way, if maybe they wake up in the middle of the night, they check to see if the cows are doing okay. If they are, they go back to sleep and they get some rest. Like I said, in years past, it wasn't that easy, and it took a lot more time. On the right is, and actually, this image comes from another employee of the Illinois Farm Bureau. His name is Rodney Knittel. He handles a lot of our trucking and transportation issues. He also raises some very high quality purebred sheep. And he sent me this picture. He gave me this picture because I was at a meeting with him a couple of weeks ago. One of this ewe in the middle of the picture here, she's in labor, and he was monitoring her from the meeting we were at on his phone to make sure her labor was going okay. And if she were to experience any problems, he had his high school age son on call, and he could call his son to go in and check on her and make sure that process would move along just fine. So, it's not only about saving time for our farmers, it's also about providing good care and better care to the animals. By being able to monitor them this way, they can be more reactive. They can help care for those animals when they are having trouble with the labor process, and hopefully save some additional lambs, save some additional calves that in the past may not have been able to be saved just because of the challenges that comes through labor and monitoring the animals. But it can go even beyond that. On the left-hand side of the screen here, this is a robotic milking system. It's a system that's actually in operation in a dairy farm up in Joe Daviess County in the northwest corner of the state of Illinois. It used to be that farmers would milk cows, and many still do, milk cows manually 2 or 3 times a day. This system actually is robotic and allows the cows to milk themselves. When they feel as though they want to milk, they go into this milking machine. It milks them. They have a tag around their neck that tracks data, and it doesn't just track when they get milked. It tracks their temperature. It tracks their movement. It tracks their feed intake. That information is transferred over to a computer, and then the farmer can monitor that and keep an eye on the health of the animals. You can see if they're eating well. That data then, with a broadband connection, could be sent to his nutritionist. A lot of our dairy farmers may work with a nutritionist to determine the feed ration that helps maximize the health and milk production of that cow. This information, if connected to the internet, can also be utilized to be monitored remotely. So the dairy farmer, maybe he's out cutting hay and he wants to keep an eye on how the milking operation is going. He can see this data and keep an eye on things remotely. On the right is a similar type of system for a hog farm. So today's modern hog farms are climate controlled. They're kept at about 70 degrees, the right humidity to keep the animals comfortable. There are systems in place that farmers can monitor remotely to make sure that everything's going well. They may not be able to be in the barn 24 hours a day, so they can keep an eye on things. They can make sure there's sufficient feed and water. They can make sure the temperature is correct. And if there's any problems, they can get alerted and they can go care for those farms. But without a broadband connection, without a connection to the internet, that becomes obviously difficult, if not impossible. Now for our specialty, what we call our specialty crop and local foods producers, the internet has become extremely important, and a broadband connection has become extremely important. And this has been only magnified by COVID. Many of our local foods producers were, prior to COVID, selling a lot of their produce or their local foods products through farmers markets and restaurants. And you can probably assume what happened when
Bill, did you go on mute? Or did we lose you altogether?
Looks like we lost him altogether, Bill.
Yep. I expect he'll dial right back in. Good. Well, one of the things on our agenda, we'll wait for Bill to come back. Hopefully he knows he's gone. I had a presenter speak for 15 minutes once before he knew he had lost his connection. So that was not good. And he had turned off his phone so I couldn't text him. So that was a double bad thing. Soon we're going to be sending you a questionnaire as we think about our evaluation process and what's been happening through the program. And Robbie's created it. It's on a Google form and shouldn't take very long to complete, but it's really a long list of kind of activities that communities have done some of these things. And with our 12 communities, they've all done quite a range of different things through this process, and essentially asking if you've done it, if it's in process, or if it is or you haven't done it. And so we're going to ask you to go through that and kind of help us with that inventory. And then when we are finished at late May or early June, ask you to do that again, just so we have the correct information. But you'll be updating your original form. You won't have to go back through and do that. One of the critical things is a list of people who've been involved in your program, your local steering team and committees, and even folks who have just been participating for some specific people come up and harass them or anything, but we're actually looking to prove to our part of the funding community that helped us to keep track of that. So thanks for your cooperation on that, and there'll be more details. Hi, Bill. Well, I was just filling some time while I knew you were dialing back in. So welcome back.
Oh, my apologies.
Well, that's why we're here, working on broadband. So
yeah. Well, I'm in my office today, so I didn't anticipate this happening. All right. So where did you lose me? Somewhere around specialty crop production, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay.
We're just getting into that.
Okay. So let me see if I can share my screen again, and we'll try this again. So again, my apologies.
Not a problem. We know how that goes. So you're just talking about the transition from farmers markets to
to online. Okay, so we'll go back to this screen then. So as I was saying, this is a website called Market Maker that helps consumers find local foods producers, especially crop, fruit and vegetable farmers that they may want to purchase from. It's been operating for a few years, but it became even more important during the COVID situation because of, as I mentioned, the loss of markets. And so farmers could place their farm and their business on this particular website. Consumers could go out and look for, if I'm looking, in this case, if I'm looking for cheese or dairy products produced locally, I can find it on this website. I can get more information about the farmer, and then go directly to their website. And we saw more and more farmers actually selling via an online system, whether through a website or sometimes they're using social media to sell their products as a result of COVID, because as I said, they lost those markets. This also expand our other specialty crop production. So last fall, this happens to be a screenshot of a website for John Mack Orchard up in Northern Illinois. In order to maintain customer safety and in order to meet state regulations surrounding COVID, our orchards, or our UPIC orchards, had to establish online systems to do reservations and tickets so that people could still come out and pick their apples and get the fruit and vegetables they may want, but they had to manage the number of people who could be there at any one particular time. So they had to go to an online system to be able to do that. And without the ability to have a broadband connection, that's impossible to do. There were other ways it could have been done, but this made it far, far easier. And then they also, again, have the opportunity in farmers marketing, especially our fruits and vegetables and local foods production through websites, through online systems during this COVID pandemic. And again, without a broadband connection, that's impossible to do. So it's been very, very important for our specialty crop and local foods producers.
So Bill, sorry, can I ask a question? Maybe you're going to get to this. Have you actually figured out what's the broadband speeds that these farms need to run all these applications? Because what we hear from these particular communities is that their rural areas are very unserved, could be 25.3 or under. And so I just am curious as to whether you have kind of taken a position on either technology or speed in order to do all these wonderful things you're talking about.
We have not taken a position on technology. We are technology neutral. It is our belief. We don't care how you get it out there. We just want it. We want it reliable, and we want it affordable, and we want it as fast as possible. Our definition of broadband, we do support and follow the current FCC definition of broadband, which is 25.3.
Okay.
Obviously, we would support faster speeds, but we've got areas of the state, as you said, that are completely unserved at this point, and that would welcome 25.3.
Yep.
So it's a matter of getting it out there and getting it out there reliably and fast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Specifically answer your question, but if we can get 25.3, we're happy. If we can get symmetrical 100, we're happy with that as well. We're thrilled with that. I do think for future applications, and I'm the future of agriculture a little bit, and then I'll mention what I was going to say about possibly a hybrid type system.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk about the future. The future of agriculture is one that is going to include the Internet of Things. And if you're familiar with that term, we are going to see more and more data and more equipment and more sensors in agriculture connected to the internet. On the left is an autonomous tractor. That tractor is actually, that's real. It's in existence today. It's not in operation widely, but it is available. It's out there. I shouldn't say it's available. It's out there. It's been designed by a company called Case IH, based in Illinois. That tractor needs a connection to be able to be monitored. If we're going to have these types of high-tech equipment, it's going to have to be monitored, which means it needs a connection. Now, we've got equipment today that can drive itself through the field, but it's got a farmer sitting in the seat. We like to joke that farmers had autonomous vehicles before it was cool to have a Tesla, right? So, but we're the next evolution of this is to go to more autonomous vehicles that need to be monitored, and for safety reasons, and to keep track of all that data that I talked about earlier when we think about precision farming. But we're also moving into sensors that can be utilized in agriculture to monitor things and keep track of data. So in the center of the screen, that little blue bulb with the antenna on it, that's actually a sensor in a grain bin. And our farmers, for years, once they harvest their grain, may take it to a bin to store it to try to capture higher prices later. But you have to monitor that grain so that it doesn't spoil. It's a food product. And the way that they would monitor it oftentimes meant going into a bin. That's not always safe to do. They can be dangerous. It would mean possibly taking some samples or just kind of getting a feel for
Uh-oh.
and connect to the internet. And much like we saw with the camera systems that we're using on livestock farms, keep an eye on what's happening in a grain bin so I know whether my grain is spoiling. We can do the same thing with soil. This is a sensor from a company called Soil Tech that tracks sensors that could track soil fertility. There are sensors that could track soil carbon. And carbon obviously today is a very big issue. Carbon sequestration for climate change and to be a solution to climate change is something that's coming down the road for agriculture. The ability to be able to monitor that remotely could be hugely important. And so this is what's coming for agriculture down the road. Agriculture is very technologically advanced today. It's going to continue to be so. And we need connections to broadband to be able to do these kind of things. And what does it mean? Well, just as an example, there was a study released back in December from the FCC. And it showed increasing 25/3 broadband connections for farmers is correlated with a 3.6% increase in corn yields and a 3.8% increase in soybean yields. That's a pretty significant increase. And how does that occur? Well, it occurs because farmers can be more efficient. They can collect additional information to learn better. They can apply what they learn onto their farms and increase their yields and improve their farming operations.
Bill, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
So let's just say I'm a typical 1,000-acre corn and bean person in Illinois, a farmer.
Yes.
What is that annual income from a 3% increase in a
oh boy. Well,
is that more than $10,000?
Oh, well, so let's think about this. If I'm getting 200 bushel to the acre, so 200 bushels of corn to the acre right now, I'm going to use numbers to try to make this easy. Okay.
Yeah, good.
So if I'm getting 200 bushels to the acre at $5 a bushel, that's $1,000 an acre. Okay. So if I get a 3% increase, that's what, 6 bushel, $30 an acre. Is that, I'm gonna make sure.
30 an acre.
So that's about $30 an acre. If I get 1,000 acres of corn, that's $30,000.
So, it's interesting. In my experience, you can build fiber to the home just about anywhere, and certainly in the plains where it's pretty easy to put a fiber plow in, farm expense. It just seems that the providers don't make any money in it, but the farmers do. So how do you figure out that that 10,000 equals a pair of tractor tires probably on that same kind of expense. So
Sure.
How do we balance that? Helping the providers make this investment, or do we just go back to the co-op model that the farmers co-op is going to own the fiber network to connect the farms?
There are a lot of solutions, a lot of different options. You mentioned co-ops, so rural electric co-ops have a lot of interest in providing service into rural areas because they have infrastructure in place. They have power lines with poles all over already, and so they have the possibility of providing that service. I mentioned before that I think there is, for the future, I think that the way this problem gets solved is probably via a hybrid type system where you have fiber possibly to the home. But the other challenge here is you have to have fiber you have to have broadband connectivity to every acre in order to really see these kind of increases. Okay, that's not just fiber to the home. That's connecting that 1,000 acres of corn that you mentioned, right? Because I operate my equipment out there, my tractor's not going to be connected to a fiber line. It's just not. It's going to have to be Wi-Fi or cell signal. And so it's going to be a hybrid system that is going to be the solution in my mind for the future, right? I may have fiber to the home and I may need to bounce that fiber signal, or I may need to bounce that Wi-Fi signal off of an area to get my coverage out in my fields so that I can operate my equipment. Now, we're advocates obviously of additional funding for supporting infrastructure build outs. We're seeing a lot of that happening in Washington, and you're all aware obviously of what's going on in the state of Illinois. We've been supportive of that effort as well. So I think, additional funding and looking at how we put together a hybrid type system that can connect as much as possible to benefit farmers is the solution that we would be looking for anyway. Does that help the question?
That's great.
The other thing
that's so helpful, Bill, because we're working with the USB, the United Soybean Board, on a project, and they talk about broadband to the office or home, and then broadband to the field. And I think they also look at it as a hybrid, a hybrid model.
Sure.
Interesting. Thank you.
And I will, if I can give you a comparison, and I know it's maybe too technical, but I've also related to how the use of GPS evolved on farms. So back in the mid 90s, when GPS first was developed and used for agricultural purposes, that's when we first started doing some of these precision ag tools. You've simply got the satellite signal to a tractor or a combine, and it wasn't very accurate. Okay, it was accurate within several feet or 30 feet. That's not accurate enough to operate equipment off of. You could do some sensor data off of that, but so what ended up happening was you had networks get built up of additional signals, much like today's, I'll call them fixed wireless systems, much like that, to provide a correction signal to increase the accuracy of the GPS so we could use it to drive our equipment. I see kind of broadband developing the same way with that hybrid. You've got the main connection point, but we're going to have to bounce it off a series of towers in order to get the equipment to operate the way we need it to in agriculture. Hopefully that helps. Couple more things real quick. Additional economic benefits. We're looking at billions of dollars of additional benefits for our row crops, additional billions of dollars in economic activity for livestock production as a result of livestock production. And it's also important to understand that's not just a benefit to our farmers. If you look at the next line there are societal benefits that come with that. Improved food security, not only in the U.S., but around the world. We have the most affordable food system in the world here in the U.S. We're blessed, but we still have some food security issues. So the best, as we continue to improve our production, we add to our food security, but we do it by consuming less fuel. We do it by less water usage, which is going to be critical going forward. We do it by reducing that chemical usage. All of these technologies allow us to be more environmentally friendly, more efficient, use our resources better, and provide additional improved food security, but we can't do it without a broadband connection. It is kind of the base foundation need that we have for these technologies to be applied. So those are my prepared remarks. I'd be glad to answer additional questions as you have.
Good. That last bullet point there, and those are certainly, for the average farmer, their fuel bill must be huge. And so the less they have to drive those tractors around, or the straighter they drive, or that certainly is a huge cost savings as well. That's tremendous. And the water and the chemicals, all inputs that are increasingly expensive, and the less you can use, the better off all of us are. So
yep,
that's really good. Other questions or comments? It's always interesting. The ag business is very segmented, out in the countryside, and we've got more and more people who are not on farms, but we all like to eat. And I agree, food safety and all those things are so important. And in so much of rural Illinois, ag is still the primary driver of the economy. And so, both town and country. So this is really helpful to know. What role do you see the groups like Land O'Lakes or CHS or the, John Deere in, is this these ag technology innovations? Do the farmers feel that those suppliers are providing the technical support they need, or do farmers need more community technical support? Do they have the workforce they need? What's your take on that, Bill?
And Bill, I will apologize. I because of what is clearly an unstable connection I've got right now. You broke a little bit. I heard the part about technical support that farmers need. You mentioned, I think you were mentioning something about, could you restate your question for me real quick?
Sure. I was wondering, are the ag suppliers, the supply chain, John Deere or CHS or Land O'Lakes, are they providing the necessary technical support for the farmers? Or is that something that people in these county groups that I'm working with, do they have a role?
Well, I think the answer to that question is both yes and yes. So the suppliers provide technical support for their equipment or their, whatever they're supplying, or, those sort of tools. But it may be, and we run into situations, especially with some of our older farmers, that maybe just they need technical support just to connect, right? Get their computer to connect so they can access some of these tools. And that may not be provided by some of the suppliers, right? So it depends on each individual farm, and it also depends on the technology knowledge that farmer has. But I do think there's a role there from a very basic knowledge standpoint to help farmers, get connected to the internet, get their computer set up, those kind of things. And then when it moves into the actual applications that happen on a John Deere tractor or a Case IH tractor, they go to their John Deere dealer or the Case IH dealer. If they're working with an agronomist at Land O'Lakes or Growmark FS, they go to them for that support. But that's very specific to whatever tool is being provided by that supplier.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Otherwise, we're about up against our time. Bill,
I just want to thank you very much for being here. As Bill emphasized, there are a lot of rural communities in this group, many of whom are on the call. And, it's really terrific to have a group like the Illinois Farm Bureau really excited about this issue. And anyway, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. And as I said, it's a huge priority for our organization. So we're happy to work with folks and provide information wherever we can.
Bill, is there an organized kind of an ag group at the Capitol that has put broadband high in the priority list?
When you say at the Capitol, Washington or Springfield?
Springfield.
Well, we work very closely with all the other ag organizations on issues on a daily basis. So we haven't specifically kind of organized around broadband, but we have conversations about it. I mentioned working with the United Soybean Board. We work, and I've had conversations with our Illinois soybean growers and Illinois Soybean Association here locally about broadband. So it's not specific to broadband, but we all work together very closely on issues on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, thanks. That would be an opportunity for the town and country folks to work together on making sure that broadband stays at the legislative agenda. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining today. We're right on time as we head out the door, and look for more information on the planning process and this assessment tool that we'll be getting to you soon. We're just putting the final touches on that. Should not be a burden, to 10 or 15 minutes at the most to check that off. And it's not a report card, and you might say, man, we didn't do half of this stuff. But if you did half of it, you're doing a great job, because we've got a lot of stuff on there. So thanks.
Hey, Bill, can I just make one point about this? We're going into a second cohort of Illinois Connected Communities. So your answers also help us improve the program. So that would be wonderful. That's why we want to encourage you to do that. And just to get a sense of what communities have done individually, because we started this process saying you all were at different points in your broadband journey, and that because of the nature of your organization or where you're located or how many people you got on your steering committee, there are a lot of differences amongst the groups. So as Bill said, this is not meant to be a comparison to each other. It's really meant to be a measurement tool for yourself. And as you do the strategic plan, may provide some ideas of things you can do, or add to your strategic plan to finish. And so again, just super appreciate that you all will participate, and Robbie and Bill will nag you or nudge you accordingly so that we can get 100% participation. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, don't make me call Robbie and make Robbie call you, because he seems real nice on these calls. But
yeah, you don't want a personal phone call from me.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Nancy.